The defense told you that this case was going to be about rumor, speculation, gossip, innuendo, words like that. What happened after that? Well, what happened after that is that you heard from almost 40 witnesses and received almost 100 exhibits, close to 100 exhibits, all of which lead you to the inescapable conclusion that the defendant did, that she killed Quentin and covered it up. Now that presumption of evidence, or presumption of innocence, that the judge told you about at the beginning of the trial, that is gone now. That is a frame of mind that you have to adopt at the beginning of a trial so that you don't prejudge the case. Everybody's entitled to that, all of us. Right? But it is gone now. Every witness we call, every exhibit we introduce, every bit of evidence that you see has chipped away at that presumption, and you no longer have to presume her innocent. And you should not presume her innocent. She sits before you right now proven guilty. Most of the evidence in this case was anything but rumor. All of it really was anything but rumor, gossip, and innuendo. Most of it was surveillance footage, GPS data, DNA, and so forth. We did call a couple of people that knew this family, knew the defendant, saw how she interacted with Quentin. They basically told you that she hated him. But that wasn't rumor, that wasn't gossip, that was based on things that they saw and they heard. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the evidence in the case shows and how the law applies to it. Because you're about to have to go back and apply the law to the facts of the case. Okay. Let's talk about evidence. Evidence is simply the means by which any fact that is put in issue is established or disproved. Evidence includes all of the testimony of the witnesses and any exhibits. You know, sometimes you'll hear people say stuff like, well, there's no evidence, there's just a bunch of people came in and said some things. Testimony is evidence. Everything that you've heard is evidence, and it all cuts against her. Evidence can be direct or circumstantial. Direct evidence is, I see my 5-year-old son under his bed eating candy in the middle of the night. That's happened. Circumstantial evidence is, I don't see it, but I find the candy wrappers the next morning. They weren't there the day before. And when I ask him about it, maybe he tells me a story about how it was actually his friend Misty or something like that. There is no legal difference in the weight that you may give to either direct or circumstantial evidence. It's all evidence, just the same. Now I'm going to start with the 204 trip as I go through the evidence and what it shows. Okay? Everybody knows about the dentist and going to Cheddar's and picking up the kids and everything. We don't need to start at 5:30 in the morning. We're going to start with the 204 trip. Because this goes directly to the state of mind that she was in when she did this. Now she told them, and you heard her say why she went on this trip in the first place, what prompted it. And it was another argument with Danny about how he doesn't pay enough attention to her. The evidence has shown that this defendant craves attention. She needs attention, specifically male attention. She needs it like you need oxygen. That is what is going on with her.
You mentioned that you and Danny had some sort of argument. You were frustrated.
Yeah, I was frustrated. It wasn't like an argument. It was more like I don't understand why you don't want to touch me type stuff. So once again, I was worthless. Pretty much. And the only way I could make myself get away from that and to try not to get 100% into that type of mindset was to take off further.
She told Bridget Brock the same thing.
You talked about you're leaving. I think you and Danny had an argument too at some point in time.
It was because of the lack of sexual tension that I was getting frustrated with her. That's the whole reason why I left anyways and came up with the reason to go.
Okay.
When she's not getting the attention, the amount and type of attention that she feels that she's entitled to, that she craves, that she needs, it makes her feel worthless. and it puts her in a really bad state of mind. And that's what was going on tonight. And of course, it's exacerbated by the tooth and all that stuff. So at 10:22, she opens this dining room door and she goes out to the Dodge Journey. That's the only door anybody really uses, coming and going from this house. It takes you right in the dining room. You come right out of the driveway into the dining room. And she goes to the Circle K, and she's looking kind of rough. Her face is swollen. She's got a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She's not in a good way. She's in a bad way. And she buys 2 Natural Light Tall Boys and 2 cigarillos. Now, the beer might have been for Danny. That seems to be how she gets out of the house without telling him where she's going, having to run and pick up some beer. But the cigarillos, those were for her and Craig. That's who she's looking for. All right, there's messages between them in arranging these prior meetups where he's asking her to pick up rolling papers. He's talking about needing to find a room, I guess in his mom's house, I think is what he says, out on Arkwright Road, where they could find, where they could smoke. Because what she and Craig are doing at this time, what they do is they get together, they smoke weed, they kick it, and they have sex. Right? That's what the evidence shows is what was going on between them. And she has been doing this a lot in the week plus leading up to this. These are all messages from her to Craig that are in evidence, and you can see them. September 25th, 2 in the morning, on the way. September 22nd, just after midnight. Okay, I'm passing Quaco now. September 28th, 10 p.m., on the way now. October 1st, 1 a.m., I'm about to head that way probably. Just probably can only stay for a couple hours. A couple hours. These people are spending a lot of time together. October 2, about to drive over there actually. October 2, that was in the morning, this is in the evening. About to head over there and grab his ass at 40 so he'll shut up. This is what I was talking about. The way she gets out of the house and goes over here, she tells Danny she's going to make a beer run. Now, it's not just about the sex, all right? It's that he is providing this attention and affection that again is like, it's like air to her. She has to have it. He's sending her messages like, this is in the context of her complaining about Danny and how he's not giving her what she wants. Craig is sending her messages such as, don't worry, it will be okay, I got your back. And she's replying, I know you do, and I got yours all the way. This is what she needs, this is what she craves. And this is what she is looking for that night. The evidence essentially shows that Craig was like her emotional support drug dealer at the time, okay? And these are texts between her and Danny. Now, she had not told Danny that that's where she was going. She must have just mentioned the Circle K, the convenience store run. And the reason I say that is at 10:32, when she's leaving the Circle K, she tells Danny, gonna run to 204, I guess. He did not know that that's where she was going. Because he responds, oh, okay. Be safe, I guess, my queen. I will be, and I'll be quick, I promise. And she had told him that before. He says, I hope so. So now she's on the way out to see Craig. 10:36, the dining room door opens, and that's Paul getting home. Danny texts the defendant 2 minutes after that door activity. Paul showed up and is going to bed. Now, Paul told you that after he got something to eat and went upstairs, he was in the bedroom and pretty much out of play for the rest of the night. That's direct evidence. Danny told you the same thing. That's direct evidence. The defendant in her interviews said the same thing. That is direct evidence. And Paul's phone activity provides circumstantial evidence supporting this. There's this exchange between him and a coworker where the coworker asks Paul, what time are you going in tomorrow? And Paul responds with a 2-digit response, 12. That's at 11:40. He told you at this point I was laying in bed and either asleep or going to sleep. And the guy sends him 2 more messages and Paul doesn't respond. That short response, and then the lack of any response to those 2 following messages, is circumstantial evidence that what all 3 of them told you, that he was up in his room and how to play, is true. So that's what I mean when I say all this stuff is evidence, direct and circumstantial. You can look at this stuff and tell what happened. Back to Danny and the defendant's text messages with him. 10:41, she tells him, I'm about to turn on to 204. He says, okay. And then you get this series of text messages. Now, Danny told you that he was asleep. Okay, he told you that he was asleep or close to it when she got back from 204. She said that in her early interviews, when she was all in on the abduction between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. story, and it didn't occur to her that she might have to, at some point, throw Danny under the bus and pretend like he was awake. She said that he was asleep. And there's a series of messages, so that's direct evidence, those 2 things. Now there's a series of messages that provide circumstantial evidence in support of that, strong circumstantial evidence. The only way to read these messages is this is a dude who just wants to go to bed and is in the process of doing that. 10:44, he says, thank you for the little bit left, baby, so sweet, no lie. Now, he was straight up with you. He told you this is a reference to a very small amount of cocaine that she had left for him. He wasn't trying to hide anything from you. And he went to sleep not long after this. And you heard from Special Agent Snyder that drugs affect people in different ways. And cocaine, in his experience, cocaine does make some people energetic, some people sleepy. It kind of depends on the individual person's physiology. And so these messages go on, but Danny just trying to get her home because all this guy wants to do is go to sleep. Because he's got to get up for work in the morning. And the fact that he does get up for work in the morning at 5:20 is further circumstantial evidence that he was asleep and out of play, was not involved in any way, and had no idea what she had done. 10:45, I love you. Please come back so we can crash together. 10:51, or not. 10:52. I guess I'm going to eat this food and try to stay up for a few. 10:56. I don't want to be tired, or you to be tired either. Now, there are a couple, I've taken them out, there are a couple responses from her in here, but they're like one word, they're kind of like stiff arm type responses, like, leave me alone, I'm not really talking to you. 10:57. And I know you don't feel great, I don't know how you're still up. 11:01. Moi. Now, what is this message? This is a good night kiss from Danny. This is Danny giving up on it and going to sleep. I guess I'm not waking up. I'm crashing. You're doing whatever it is that you're doing. I'm going to bed. Now, what is different about this night than all the other nights involving Craig? Again, this is the guy that she's going to for the attention that she needs at a time where she's upset and in a bad state because of the tooth and because of Danny, and she wants to go there and get what she needs and craves. Unfortunately, Craig wasn't there. He told you that. It was unchallenged on cross-examination. I think Mr. Hilliard just asked him to repeat that. You weren't there? All right. And that's why she's only there for 10 minutes. She was in a bad enough state this night that this was a pop-in. There were no set-up text messages like there had been on other nights. She just drove over there and tried to catch him, and he wasn't there. So now she's going home. Hasn't gotten what she needed from Danny, and hasn't gotten what she needed from Craig because Craig wasn't there. That was the point of the whole Craig thing, the messages and then putting them up, is just to establish that he wasn't there and he was not able to give her the male attention that she needed. It's not like a character assassination, like, hey, here's some salacious text, let's embarrass her. No, it's part of the story of that night. It helps tell the story of what happened. And so she has to settle for $80 worth of Coke and Percocet from Tim Weston, who also lives out there, of the same family. She goes home and She enters that dining room door at 11:13 p.m. And you saw the GPS and everything, it all lines up with this. We don't need to look at that anymore. I think you all got it, the GPS stuff. This is like 15 minutes after Danny's last text to her. The dude is asleep or close to it. And so she's the only one who's up. And she's the only one that's agitated. And she's the only one that hates the kid, that hates Quentin. And she's the only one blowing coke all night and stewing about how unhappy she is and how she's a victim and everybody's mistreating her. Let's talk about we talked about circumstantial evidence. Let's talk about the circumstances of this period of time. 11:13 p.m. until when she's taking Quentin's dead body to a dumpster of azalea. Like 3 days before, she had typed this search into Safari. Is it common for a mother to have resentment or even anger towards her child because of the father or another reason? That is a circumstance in this case.
If I'm doing pretty good throughout the day and I got a good day overall, and then something might trigger, slower. Okay, I can feel it. I can feel myself changing the way I talk, the way I think, the opinions I have, everything, feel the difference. But when it happens, like a day like today with the amount of stuff going on, stress and emotion, whatever, I just snap.
So this is kind of like her baseline behavioral issue, anger issue. She's freely telling the police, I flip out about stuff. If it's been a good day, it might take me a little longer to flip out. But if it's been a bad or stressful day, it can happen like that. Well, this was a bad or stressful day. She had her tooth pulled. She says 1,000,000 times that she was in pain and couldn't sleep. And so this would be one of these days where the snap would happen quickly. This is evidence. Another circumstance is that baseline behavioral anger problem, propensity to snap, is exacerbated by the drug use.
So just before you left to go take the trash to Azalea, you were on cocaine, what was that?
Perks, coke, weed. Unhappiness, physical pain, discomfort from the tooth. These are the circumstances.
I become angry and impulsive when I'm like,
That's her talking about cocaine. So this is where she was at in that period of time where she's all alone, stewing in her own unhappiness. She says it herself. I was in a lot of high emotion and a lot of pain. And so it's under those circumstances that for reasons known only to her, that she does the unspeakable. All right, the judge will tell you that one of the things we don't have to prove is motive. And the reason for that is that, man, it's really hard to figure out why people do things sometimes. People do stuff that after the fact doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and that they probably wish they hadn't done. So we don't have to prove motive. But it's under these circumstances that she does something unspeakable. And it's literally unspeakable. And that is why she could not bring herself to admit it or tell the truth about it. Because it is an unspeakable thing for a mother to kill her child. But we know she did it in part because of everything she does afterwards. Her flashlight is on for 20 seconds at 1 and 2 a.m. And that's because she's creeping around the house this long route that you have to go to get out this living room door. It's the only time anybody ever uses the living room door. That's her taking Quentin's body out to the car. And she's using that door because it's the furthest one away from Danny, less likely to wake him up and have him say, hey, where are you going? And what is that you're holding in your arms? So she goes out and she puts Quentin in the car. She goes back in and out a couple times at 107 and 110. She's going to want to get some shoes on, get her wallet, because she's very careful about not getting stopped by the police and not drawing any attention to herself on this trip. That brings us to the second trip, the Azalea trip. Now, she would eventually say, when they kind of pinned her down and said, look, we found Quentin now, so we know that you put him in the dumpster because we know where the dumpster went and all that. She would eventually claim, look, I was just so messed up, I don't remember anything. Totally ridiculous claim, especially when you look at what she was able to do and how she was operating that night. It was all very calculated, all right? At least the aftermath, right? 1:13, she plugs her phone into the charger in the car. She's able to do that. At some point in here, she drafts a text message to Danny saying, getting some Orajel. Right, the cover-up starts right away. Getting some Orajel. Now, that message is never sent. And that's probably because she made the calculation that, look, that's more likely to make his phone ding and wake him up and draw more attention. I just won't send it, and I'll bank on the fact that I can get out and back without him ever waking up, which is what happened. Unfortunately for her, they were able to find this in her phone. So she knows what she is doing. This is calculated. She turns from Buckhalter onto Ogeechee Road. Hopefully this video will cooperate. This is one we're having a little bit of a problem with. She's coming to a complete stop. She's using her blinker. That's how you want to drive when you have your dead child in the car and you're going the wrong way. You don't want to get stopped for rolling through a stop sign or failing a signal. That's what's going on here. So when she tells you, I just don't remember, don't believe her. Don't believe her. This is that camera that's oriented at the dumpsters, and you can see the headlights up in the top corner. Right, I'm just the top center. Now I've left this whole video in here. I don't know whether I'll play the entire thing, but the reason I left it in here is because it's long. It's like 2 minutes that she sits at that dumpster. You don't need 2 minutes to throw away old food. A story that was always ridiculous and totally transparent. She is sitting there thinking about whether she's really going to do this. Because once you put them in there and you drive off, you can't take that back. That Waste Pro truck is coming, and you've made your decision. 2 minutes to think about whether she really wants to throw Quentin, her son, in the garbage, such that he gets crushed into pieces by the compactor in the garbage truck and ground into pieces at the landfill. She thought about it. She thought about it. And she chose to do it. And there was that bit in her October 12th interview with Special Agent Snyder that was so telling. She's given this ridiculous story about throwing away the trash. And he puts in front of her a picture of that camera on the trailer right across from the dumpsters that points at the dumpsters. And he asked her, what are we going to see when we pull the footage from this camera? Now, unfortunately, that camera didn't work, despite the best efforts of everybody at Chatham County Police Department, the local FBI office, and the digital forensics analysis unit, Quantico, just didn't have footage from this time period. It was an interior camera that was not ruggedized for the elements in the technical language of Sergeant Coleman. But she doesn't know that. And so she thinks that what she did there was caught on camera. And it's a rare moment of truth, because Special Agent Snyder asked her, what are we going to see when we look at that footage? What are we going to see you do? And she tells him, you're going to see me open up the trash, look at it, close it up, and put it in the dumpster. Tie it up and put it in the dumpster. And he asks her, it's a sensible question, why? If you're just throwing away old smelly food, why do you need to look at it? She doesn't really have an answer. What she was doing was looking into the face of her dead son, Quentin, one last time, and making a conscious decision to tie him up and throw him away like a piece of trash. That's what that means. So think about that. Think about that, what that would have looked like in that moment, in that bag. It's easy for these things to become abstractions, the Azalea trip, the Origel story. But think about that. That is a real live child. Well, not anymore. That is a real child in a trash bag being thrown away. And then she eventually pulls off. When she does that, she commits the offense of concealing the death of another. That's count 4 in the indictment. You conceal the death of another when you unlawfully conceal someone's death in a way that hinders the discovery of whether they were unlawfully killed. And I would say it did hinder the discovery of whether he was unlawfully killed. It took them weeks to find him. And really the only reason to do that is if you unlawfully kill him. I mean, that is a hell of a thing to do. That is a hell of a thing to do. And the only reason to do it is if you have to do it to try to get out of a murder charge. As she pulls out, still driving carefully, coming to a complete stop. Putting on her turn signal. Anybody who's ever gone out to dinner and had 2 drinks and driven home and just didn't want to take any chances knows exactly what she's doing driving like this. Trying to avoid any attention. The next day she would talk about a couple times, once in this interview that you watched, and according to the testimony of Detective Lemons, once when they were outside smoking a cigarette. She talked twice about the importance of the first 24 hours of a missing persons investigation.
Nobody knows it by the time it hits tomorrow morning. You've already been past the time when you're most likely to find a missing person. It'll be past after that. You're less likely, right? After the first 3 rounds.
Now, why does she bring that up twice? She's posing it as like it's something that she's worried about, that if they don't find him quickly, that he'll never be found at all. What is going on here is it's exactly the opposite of this. This is not a fear of hers. This is her hope. All right? She might be calculating. She might be manipulative. But she's not necessarily that smart. Okay? She does not understand that when a child goes missing, they pull out all the stops. She seriously underestimated and did not understand the capabilities of people like the Chatham County Police Department and Detective Lemons. Agencies like the FBI, Special Agent Snyder, Special Agent Solomon, Special Agent Burns, Detective Noble, Jenny Cox. She didn't understand the commitment of people like Officer Zerke to be out there every day looking for Quentin. She did not understand that all of these people were going to care about Quentin, whom they never met, more than she did. By 1:26 in the morning, she's home and she's unplugging her phone. She's going in that dining room door. 1:39, she goes out again. And then there was this, her phone being unlocked from 1:47 to 2:01, a little less than 15 minutes. And I asked Special Agent Burks, could you tell what she was doing on her phone at that point? And he said, gosh, I can't say for sure, but it looked like she was scrolling Facebook based on my training and experience, and he's got a lot. She's sitting there on Facebook trying to calm herself down and level out a little bit after doing this thing so that she can go to sleep and pretend like everything's normal and further the cover up in the morning. 2:01, dining room door opens again. 2:04, it opens. 2:36, it closes. And here's what she had to say about that. She says that that's because she was still frantically blowing lines, going outside, smoking cigarettes, smoking weed, coming back in, blow another line, repeat the cycle.
And so you're doing the code test while the back door is opening and shutting.
Constantly, every time we hit one, one of those cigarette, you hit one, another cigarette, me, I was hit one just from weed and a cigarette. And always, weed was always the extreme for what I was doing.
Somewhere in there, she decides that she needs to go in the kitchen pantry or her closet or wherever she was keeping it and grab this rice cereal and spread it around in the car as part of the cover-up. Some kind of half-baked effort to absorb odor or something like that. Throw off the canines or whatever. Like I said, calculated, manipulative, not necessarily smart. She said about this stuff that it had exploded in her car more than a month before, and she had cleaned it up, and she had taken it into the house. I'm sorry, but there is no reason for that stuff to be out on the tiki bar when police show up in the morning, unless she was spreading it around in the car, either in the middle of the night or in the morning before the police got there. That's what we call a clue. She knows what she did. She knew what she did at the time, and she was trying to cover it up. "5:20, Danny gets up and texts the babysitter, hey, the kids are going to stay here with her today, Miss Michelle. Now, there was some effort made in trial to make this look like shady or nefarious on the part of Danny. And sometimes you have a fact like that where initially when you hear it, like, he texted the babysitter that they're going to stay here. That's maybe a little weird. But then you just ask him, and you get a totally sensible, reasonable answer, which is that he was just sick of her shit, okay, to put it candidly. He was just sick of it. You're staying up all night doing drugs, not waking up, and running around, not waking up to go to work, and wanting to spend money on a babysitter. That's all this is. And it couldn't have been that abnormal because Michelle's response is not, well, Daniel, this is highly out of the ordinary. There's something going on. And she just says, okay. And he takes this route to work, the most direct route, the quickest route, that does not go by Azalea Mobile Home Plaza. That's the testimony you heard, and we looked at the zoom in and all that stuff. She eventually wakes up, and now it's time to launch the story. And at 9:14, she calls Danny and gives her the whole front door was open, and he's not in his playpen, the abduction story. Danny gets this phone call and runs out of work. He does not know what is going on. He has no idea what she has done. You heard him talk about, and his boss Dave corroborated this, that Danny left his North Face jacket and cigarettes there. he would not, you saw Danny, he's a nice enough guy, I guess, but he's not sophisticated enough to know if he was involved in this, that he needs to begin acting before he's ever like home talking to the police. It just would not occur to a guy, if he's somehow involved and is trying to disguise that, to start acting at work before he ever even gets home. He runs out like this because he believes what she is saying. He believes what she is saying. He certainly wants to, he doesn't want to believe that she did anything. So he believes it. That jacket was important to him. He was talking about it. He mentioned the brand twice. It's my North Face jacket, my North Face jacket. It's an expensive jacket. He would not have left this thing there with his cigarettes in it unless this is an organic reaction, a real reaction, a genuine reaction to something that he believed. He doesn't even clock out. Dave Mullins told you that this little triangle up here means that somebody had to manually clock him out. And Dave also told you that he saw him in the parking lot and he was visibly crying. That is real. All of this. Danny told you that he didn't know. That's direct evidence. This is all circumstantial evidence that strongly supports that. There is no reason not to believe him when he says that. 6 or 8 minutes into that phone call, I think it's 8, she opens the front door. I told you we were going to see this in the opening statement, and you did. She's on the phone with him saying, the front door was open and Quentin's gone. Meanwhile, she's opening the door and staging the scene. And she wanted to say in those interviews, well, the front door sensor's not working, how do we know? How do we know that that data is reliable? Well, again, the police work in this case was phenomenal. Detective Noble told you he sat down with those records that he got from ADT, and he pulled up the body-worn camera footage of the police officers that responded to the scene, and he looked at the timestamps on the body-worn camera to see when they were opening the door and seeing how firm it was. I think Lieutenant Foster talked about that. And he cross-checks those timestamps in the ADT records. That's evidence. That door sensor was working, and this is exactly what it looks like. This is part of the cover-up. She should have opened the damn door before she called him. Finally, at 9:39, she calls 911. Now, she doesn't want police attention. She's trying to run out a 24-hour clock. That's how she thinks this works. If they don't find him in 24 hours, you've pretty much gotten away with it. She doesn't want police attention right away. She only calls the police because Michelle comes over there and tells her, like, you really need to call the police. Your child is gone. And that's when we get into what has a heading in the indictment of the falsehoods on October 5. Now, I typed up this indictment. I called these things falsehoods in there because at the time of indictment, nothing's been proven. And falsehoods sounds a little softer maybe than lies. I'm going to go ahead and call these things lies now. Okay, because we're at the end of this thing and we've proven all of this. The lies on October 5th. Count 5, false report of a crime. She committed this offense by implying that Quentin Simon had been abducted by an unknown intruder. Now, initially, it was just an implication.
I woke up about 9 o'clock and I was going about 6, so between 3-hour period, somehow the front door was unlocked and the sun is not even sleeping.
She would go on a little later that day to state this a little more directly.
Accident. There was no somebody falling. There was no horse playing. There was no door being looked over and a child walked outside. There was none of that. None of it at all. And whatever happened, somebody picked that baby up out of that playpen and they took it with them. That's what they did. There's no way he can get out of that playpen on his own. No way.
Of course, there's the whole deal with her telling Detective Wilkins that she went to bed at 12 and woke up at 9, so this thing starts falling apart almost immediately.
So when's the last time you saw your child?
When I went to bed last night.
And what time was that? Do you remember?
Around 12.
12? Okay.
12 hours. But I had my wisdom teeth removed yesterday.
I'm sorry, that's
So, they kind of late.
I get you. Listen, I have them too.
So I got up this morning about 9.
Detective Robbins sees the car on the flock camera hitting the previous night, relays that to Lieutenant Foster, and Lieutenant Foster goes and gets the first version of the Origel story.
Okay, so where'd you go?
Right up the road right here at that Chevron. And my friend that I used to work with, she got ordered up because they didn't have any Circle K when I'm home.
Okay.
You know, as one does, leave your house at 1 in the morning to get a topical oral anesthetic from your friend. And Danny, of course, is looking at her like, what is this woman talking about? I've been home from work for about 3 hours now, maybe 2.5, and I've never heard a word about this. So then they go to headquarters, and she continues the lies of October 5th. Count 6, making a false statement by saying that the purpose of the 204 trip was to pay an existing drug debt, paying off a $20 weed front. We're looking at an $80 cash app, and she later admits that it was for Percocet and cocaine.
And at that point, you didn't get anything.
No, I just paid him $20. I gave him $20 and I left him. It was refunded a couple days ago.
Each one of these lies, on each one of these days, is a separate crime. Count 7, making a false statement for saying that the only controlled substance of which she was a regular user was marijuana. And you'll remember this flowery lie that turned out to be totally untrue, like in a big way.
Like, anybody got to worry about anything with me is not me. Because I was going to be honest with me. I'll be honest about that. Everything else, no. My mom's a drug addict. I watched her OD. Because, you know, she covered up for me to touch. So I said, no. Anything that's not homegrown or bought at a convenience store, I don't want it. When I mean homegrown, I don't mean cooked up stove. I mean cooked up dirt. When I say homegrown, I mean grown. Not created.
Count 8, false statement for saying that the only controlled substance she had used in the past 24 hours was marijuana.
No, I did not take a Percocet right now. I'll go piss in the cup for you right now.
And then the big one, right? The big one is what she was doing at Azalea after 1 a.m. Count 9, making a false statement. That she met Misty at a Chevron service station and had obtained Origel from her.
My mouth was really bothering me about almost 1 in the morning. They called Circle K to see if they had Origel. No. So I had contact with another one of my friends named Misty that I used to work with. She has a lot of mouth problems, and asked her if she had any Origel. And I met her up there at the Chevron. And I called her and got back and went back home. Y'all, so 12 minutes.
And this lie is for the purpose of committing the offense charged in count 10. False statement by concealing a material fact. Most material fact in the case. That on that trip she had in fact traveled to Azalea Mobile Home Plaza and there had discarded her son Quentin Simon in a dumpster. October 8th with Bridget Brock. More lies. Count 11. Again stating that the purpose of the 204 trip was to pay an existing drug debt. Now, I told you in an opening statement that the evidence would show that she just had not had enough time to adjust to the new information of Misty saying, I didn't see her, and the cameras saying, we did. So her only choice at this point, because they confront her with this like during this interview, is just to double down on it.
He left about 10:30 to go to 2:04 again. Pay somebody $20.
$20.
Okay, and who are you paying the $20 to? Red, and what for?
For me.
For me.
$20.
Okay.
Count 12, false statement for concealing a material fact. The point of that lie was to conceal the fact that she had used controlled substances, that she was in a lot of high emotion and a lot of pain and using cocaine, Percocet, and weed. And again, that's because that circumstance contributed so directly to what she did to Quentin. Count 13, false statement for again stating that the purpose of the Azalea trip was to meet Misty, which again is not even her real name, to obtain Orajel.
Let's talk about that, okay? Because Misty had talked to you.
Yeah, she has.
She hasn't talked to you in quite some time.
Yeah, she
And
has.
she did not have a conversation with you about the Orajel.
Yes.
So in your mind, you've looked at all these timestamps and plausibly you came up with a story that's partly true.
No, that is
But
true.
there's very, very many missing pieces, right? And in your story, you haven't been completely honest about where you were at and why you were
I
there.
was 100% honest about where I was at. I struggled like 16. I told him I needed to give him the Orajel that she gave me.
Right, and that didn't happen. We've already interviewed this.
Yeah, I got the Orajel. That did happen. She said that look on the side of her mouth. That's the reason why I asked her for it.
You have to stop saying this. It did not happen.
Yes, it did.
And again, the purpose of that is to conceal that material fact, what she was doing there. And we've talked about what that was. October 12th, making a false statement by again saying that what she had done in Azalea was meet Misty for Orajel. And by now the location has changed. It was the Chevron. Now it's, okay, you got me on the cameras at Azalea? All right, fine, I met her at Azalea.
And I did.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I did.
So it may have been an Azalea, not the Chevron, but I did meet her 100%.
So you went to Missy's house, and did you go inside her house? She was just standing outside.
Yeah, I'm trying to like I really could
How long did y'all interact there with Missy? How long were you there talking?
2 minutes of quick little conversation. Her doing out her mouth, doing this. She has some crack and stuff as well. She did. How much she was outside.
A few minutes later,
She got understand. She looked out to me. 100% true. 100%. That's the only way that we're going to help me.
I didn't speak to the speaker about the house.
That's a big thing.
Yeah.
Because
If her life was on, I wouldn't have to do it. Yeah. It wasn't.
did you do any work last night?
I did get a workout last
When did
night.
you get work last night?
But I found it, and the card was one of the ones that I lost. And I found when I got back to the house.
so like 30 minutes, maybe 20 minutes after I did meet Misty 100%. Right, I didn't speak to her, but that's why I went there. It wasn't. Count 16, false statement. For saying that all she had discarded was normal household garbage, characterizing her son's dead body, Quentin's little body, as stinky shrimp pasta, which is just disgusting. I mean, if you think about it, it's just disgusting. What a disgusting thing to say.
We did just let me come to trash. Yeah, I did let the trash. It's damn supposed to take trash off a few days ago, and there's spoiled food all in my car. And so when I pulled around and see like, yeah, I stopped the food in the trash. Yeah, it was spoiled like shrimp pasta.
Shrimp pasta.
Yeah. The whole car smelled like shrimp. You just had to wait to take that out. Yeah, I got in there. I was like, what is that smell? And I felt that before I even left to go to a 4. I got out of the floor and I'm like, get out of the car. And I was like, it was really stuff, but I didn't think anything of, to be honest.
I was scared. I put a car. See an opportunity after it out.
Just didn't think about it. That's why I didn't mention it over the previous, I don't know, 5-6 hours of interviews. I didn't think anything of it. And of course, she's still concealing that material fact that she had discarded her son, Quentin Simon, in a dumpster, like a piece of trash. October 31st, time to try something new. Danny's left town by this point. Who wouldn't? You know, that was characterized as some sort of suspicious activity on his part. This is a guy who had no connection to Savannah other than her. The relationship was already falling apart. This is a difficult woman to live with and to be in a relationship with. And by this, you know, now he knows that she's killed her child. It doesn't take him that long to figure that out, even if he didn't want to believe it initially. So he goes home to his parents' house. Who wouldn't? All right, so now, by the time October 31st rolls around, hey, Danny's gone, screw Danny, I'll put it on him. And that starts with that text message to Special Agent Solomon on October 24th, and then that's made official in this October 31 interview. I'll tell you something about this count right now. It says that she made this statement to Detective Lemons, Special Agent Solomon, and Special Agent Snyder. I think the only one who testified about being a part of this interview was maybe Lemons and Solomon. When we have people like that joined with and in the indictment, we say she made this false statement to all three of these people. Even if the evidence only shows that it was made as one, like only one person testified of the three that they were the recipient of the statement, you can and should still convict on that count. Even if you have to, if you look at it, it's like, well, that person didn't say they were there for it. You can still convict on that count. You should still convict on that count, because even if you were to omit the other person from the count, it's still a lie. It's still a count. So sometimes we charge things with the word "and" between them, but you should read it as "or." You can read it as "or." We do it that way for technical legal reasons that I won't get into. We have to charge it with "and," so we put them on notice of anybody that we might prove the count as to. But you can read the "and" in there as "or," and you should read it as "or." And I think I saw somebody write that down. I'm glad for that. Another thing about like technical aspects of charges, these charges have Special Agent Brad Snyder as Bradford. That's his full first name. I don't know that came out on the witness stand. Little things like that do not require you, do not prevent you from convicting on a charge. A little thing like the person's name, first name, whether it's Brad or Bradford, is not a material allegation in the charge. So little things, I mean, if it said somebody else entirely, if it said it was actually Joe Smith, and that guy never testifies, that's a problem. But if he said on the stand that his name was Brad, and the indictment says Bradford, you don't need to get wrapped around the axle on that. So anyway, she makes this false statement. It was not her, but rather Daniel Youngkin who drove to Azalea and disposed of Quentin's body. Now, that doesn't make sense for 100 reasons. One being that she'd already admitted to making that trip and given a false alibi for it, with a false explanation for it, like 15 times. And later, in her last interview on November 21, she would once again admit to it. But here's something even a little more probably direct than that. That same day that she comes in and says that to them, that it was actually Danny, she has this call with Danny, because he's still entertaining her phone calls and things, even if they're not really together. And he asks her, "Where did you go when you left the house?" And she says, like I said, I went to get Orjo. She doesn't say, what are you talking about, dummy? That was you. Remember, I was supposed to lie for you. She just once again admits on the same day that she's telling law enforcement that it wasn't her, she's admitting to Danny at a time where she doesn't think the police are listening, that it was actually her.
So what did you do when you went out after I fell asleep?
I didn't sleep so much. I didn't get over it.
That call's just not going to... That call is just not going to sound like that if her October 31st statement is true. One, Danny's not going to be asking her, what did you do? And two, she's not going to be answering that question. She's going to be disputing the premise of it. So let's talk a little bit more about Danny. I talked to you earlier about some reasons that you can look at the circumstantial evidence in this case and the direct evidence of his testimony and her statements to know that. But there's some other things. She is telling him the same, throughout this thing, she's telling him the same lies that she's telling the police. And she's lying to him about what the FBI and police are telling her.
Why did you lie to me? About the Orjo?
I did. I did not lie to you about the ordeal.
So you went and met Misty?
Yes, I drove in and I drove out. And they tried to say that again. I asked them to show me a picture of Missy or whatever. Did y'all speak to that called lady? Did you speak to her? Did you speak to her husband? She said, I don't know anything. You know? And they said, her husband. Why didn't you speak to her?
Nobody ever told her that they had only spoken to Misty's husband. She's lying to him, just like she lied to everybody throughout this case. And if he knew anything or had anything to do with it, their interactions in the hotel room just would not look like this. She would not have to lie to him. She would only have to lie to the police and to the FBI. Like a half hour later, she tells a different lie. The first one was, hey, they told me that they only spoke to her husband. And now she says, yeah, my impression was that they talked to her and she corroborated my story.
You went and met Misty.
Wait a minute, Missy. Got one, y'all.
And you said they told her?
I think so, yes.
What did she say?
And she confirmed it.
She confirmed
I'm
it?
pretty sure, yes. It's not like they sat there and told me what was said.
Oh, but they...
They said that they spoke to Missy and they didn't question me no more about the ordeal.
Oh, okay.
This is the day of that interview with Bridget Brock. They said that they talked to Misty and then they didn't question me any more about the ordeal. That is not an accurate characterization of that interview at all. She's lying to him just like she's lying to the police and FBI. This guy didn't know anything. He didn't have anything to do with it. You heard from him directly. And one of the things the judge is going to instruct you on is how to evaluate the credibility of witnesses. And it's got a number of factors, this instruction, things for you to consider. The most important as they apply to Danny are his manner of testifying and his personal credibility as you observe it. We would submit to you that he came in here and was just an open book, a guy doing his level best to tell you the truth. And there's some things about his manner of testifying that give that impression. One is he's not hiding anything, he's not covering anything up. I asked him, and this was not like rehearsed or anything, I asked him about the alcohol in the car and whether he would ever drink and drive. And he's on the stand under oath, essentially admitting to a crime. Yeah, unfortunately, at that point in time, I would do that sometimes. Mr. Hilliard on cross-examination asked him some question to the effect of, you tried to say you were the responsible person in the home. And he corrects Mr. Hilliard, whoa, I never said I was responsible. He's taken ownership of his role in creating a certain environment in that house and certain behaviors. But he did not have anything to do with this. And he did not know anything about it. And it's kind of a shame what has happened to him, the effort that was made by her during the investigation for like a minute there to try to throw it on him. And some of the insinuations about him that have been made during this trial, and that might be made again in the defense closing argument. But you can assess Danny's credibility and consider the fact that he's corroborated by all of the circumstantial evidence in this case. One circumstance is that he was talking for like 2 months or so on a regular basis with 2 very experienced and savvy FBI agents, Special Agent Snyder and Special Agent Solomon. These people know what they're doing. Like Special Agent Snyder said, the FBI has all these sophisticated techniques and resources and all that stuff. They love that word, resources. But at their core, what do? They talk to people. They talk to people. And they had extensive, it's not just his demeanor in the interviews. You know, I asked those questions, what was his demeanor like in the interviews? And it occurs to me, having heard all the evidence, that I think I might have been missing the point a little bit, and that's a little too narrow. It's everything that he did and said over like 2 or 3 months that convinced them at every turn that he had nothing to do with this and no knowledge of it. He is not capable of pulling that off if it's not true. He is not capable of conning Special Agent Snyder and Special Agent Solomon. He ain't that guy. Probably nobody is. And that brings us to the day of arrest, lies on November 21. After giving all these detailed stories and changing the details whenever that became necessary, the weight of the bag, how exactly she threw it in, the exact amount of, the color of the ties on the bag, all that stuff. Now, it's, I just don't remember at all. I don't remember anything from when I got home from 204 and saw Quentin safe in the crib to when I was driving home from Azalea and hit the railroad tracks and jerked back into, forming memories, I guess. Just totally absurd. Totally contrary to all these detailed cover stories she'd given to that point. And contradicted even in this interview. There's this line of questioning where Detective Lemons asks her, was Quentin in the trash bag? And she says, well, there were actually 2 trash bags, which is a new fact, yet another change. Even on the final day, she's still changing things. And then Detective Lemons says, is that what Quentin was in? Or did you use a bag to dispose of Quentin? She says, I don't remember grabbing a bag. I was focused on throwing away the trash. So there's 2 things going on here. One is that she is admitting that she remembers what she did at Azalea. It was like 30 minutes after she said, I just have no memory. And she's now describing details again. And 2, she's more or less admitting that, I threw Quentin in the dumpster. That's the only way to hear this. This is the closest you're going to get to a confession from this woman. All right? You can read this as a confession to concealing Quentin's death by throwing him in the dumpster.
What's the last thing you remember before?
Sitting on the bed.
And then it goes to driving back from Zillion.
Have you seen him in the bed right when you got home or something? Like you came home and did it lying and then you saw him? I got home, he was lying. He was on the bed. So that was like the 10 something, 2:40. I'm not worried about him for that. Right, sure. And that was actually less than memory all of that night. In the trouble. Yeah. I said I hit the rugby tracks.
So that was actually, I got my clips mixed up. That's actually just like the main story. That's the story for that day. Just don't remember, 2-hour gap in memory. And then this is the bit about the trash bags. And what I'm urging you to view is something like a confession, the closest that you're going to get from this person.
Just story with Standard Brad. There was another trash bag there. Was that what Quentin was in? Before there was like 2 minutes later, I should remember. It was for food. When I was trying to get rid of it. Did you use a trash bag? I don't recall grabbing the trash bag from the house.
And then there's this. This also is something like a confession that she did at the dumpster, what she's charged with doing.
Let me show you something. It's gonna help with what Helen's asking for now. This is a very small fraction of the mountain. What that looks like at home is trash. And everything to the left and right of that is trash. You can see how little those people are. Do you think that we could have found him if we didn't know that you put him in the dumpster and we knew exactly where that dumpster went?
So that brings us back to the beginning of the indictment. We've made it through the end. I want to go back to the beginning and talk about the murder charges. Okay, because this is not just a concealing the death case. This is not just a false statements case. It's not really a false report of a crime case. It's a murder case. She killed Quentin. So I do need to talk to you a little bit about murder. Now, one of the things the court is going to tell you, the judge will instruct you on this, that crimes have what's are called essential elements. Those are the things that we have to prove. The essential elements of a crime. And these, it's actually a very short list, right? It's like bullet points. We have to prove that she caused the death of her son, Quentin Simon, a human being, that she did it unlawfully. And this word is not really in play in this case. It just means like, it's no case where there's a defense to the killing, like self-defense or defense of others or something like that. And for malice murder, count 1, we have to prove that she did it with malice aforethought. Now, we have to talk about malice a little bit, okay, what it is and what it isn't. You might hear it and think, well, doesn't malice mean to hate somebody? Well, first of all, there's some evidence of that in this case. But it's a legal term, it's a technical term. And the judge will tell you it is not necessarily ill will or hatred. Rather, it is simply the unlawful intent to kill. You may find malice when the circumstances, circumstantial evidence, show that the defendant acted with the deliberate intention to unlawfully take the life of another person. State does not have to prove premeditation to prove murder. Perhaps in some states you do, but in Georgia the state does not have to prove premeditation to prove malice murder. If a killing is done with malice, again, just simply the intent to kill, that's it. It is murder regardless of how briefly the malicious intent existed. No specific length of time is required for malice to arise in the defendant's mind. Malice may be formed in a moment. If malice was in the defendant's mind at the time of the act or killing, that is enough for the killing to be murder. Malice may be express or implied or both. You may imply malice when all the circumstances of the killing show an abandoned and malignant heart. The judge will also tell you on the issue of intent that you can infer that people intend the natural and probable consequences of their actions. And if you make an assault on a 20-month child that is enough to kill them, and she did, you can infer that she intended to do it. You don't get to smother a baby or punch a toddler, I should say, or punch a toddler in the abdomen such that it lacerates his liver or something like that, or strangle a 20-month-old toddler, and then say, well, I didn't mean to kill him. The only way to kill a healthy 20-month-old child is on purpose. Straight up. Manner of death is not an element of the crime. I imagine that the defense is going to say, well, gosh, they can't even tell you how it happened. Manner of death is not an element. We do not have to prove exactly how she did it, and in this case, how could you? She covered it up. She threw him in a dumpster so that he got ground up into little pieces. And now she wants to come in and say, can't catch me, you don't know how I did it. It is not an element that we need to prove. All the facts show that her intent was that he never be found at all, right? And that she get to just forevermore be the sympathetic mother of a missing child. Maybe go on, Dr. Phil every 5 years and appeal to the public for his return. And the next best thing for her, in her mind, is that he be so torn apart that the experts, despite their best efforts, can't tell exactly how she did it. But it doesn't matter because we don't have to prove it. And that is a sensible rule. That is a sensible rule. And I'll tell you this, if you get wrapped around the axle on that, you go back there and you say, well, gosh, how can we ever know? You are getting played in the worst way. You are getting absolutely played. If you do that, you're bringing her plan to completion. You are telling her, hey, great job. You did a good enough job with the cover-up that you get to skate. Nobody likes to get played. Don't get played. There are 2 other murder counts on the indictment. Both of them are felony murder. Felony murder does not require the intent to kill. It just requires that you cause somebody's death in the course of committing a felony. Those 2 felonies, the first one is aggravated assault. You know what an assault is? It's just any kind of attack on a person of any sort. An aggravated assault is an assault that's done with an object that, when used offensively against a person, did result in serious bodily injury. And it did result in serious bodily injury because Quentin is dead. The identification of what the object was is not an element. The object in this context can be anything. And there are 100 cases from the Georgia Supreme Court saying as much. It can be your hands, it can be your feet, it can be a pillow, it can be the side of the pack and play, the corner of the pack and play. It can be your fist, it could be a blunt object that you pick up, it could be a sheet, it could be a blanket. The only way that he's dead is if she made an assault on him with an object of some nature. And we do not have to prove what it is. People do not do this sort of thing in front of witnesses, and they don't like to talk about it. Count 3, felony murder, is based on the felony of cruelty to a child in the first degree. You commit cruelty to a child in the first degree when you cause cruel and excessive physical pain to a child. What counts as cruel or excessive physical pain? There's no legal definition of what counts as cruel or excessive. That's for you to decide. And this is pretty straightforward here, right? The thing that she did to him was enough to cause him to die. It hurts to die. Right, so she committed this felony. This count also, it has the word malicious in it. It says maliciously causes cruel or excessive physical pain. It's a different meaning of malice from in the context of malice murder, where it means intent to kill. Here it just means it wasn't an accident. Whatever you did on purpose. It wasn't an accident. And as with the previous 2 counts, the specific manner of the infliction of the pain, how exactly she hurt him, is not an element. It's not something that we have to prove. So, nobody wants to believe that a mother would do this unspeakable thing. Nobody wants to believe. You'd bend over backwards to believe it was anything but an intentional killing or an intentional assault that resulted in his death, in Quentin's death. The police did not want to believe that. But the problem is all the evidence. Right? The problem is all the evidence. The police looked at every possibility. Right? There are only so many ways to die. There are only so many ways a healthy, robust toddler can die. If you have kids, you know that at 20 months old, at nearly 2, a little kid is like a bowling ball. They're tough. They're resilient. They don't just die. It takes something happening. I mean, yeah, there's like car accidents and things like that. That's not what we're talking about here. They ruled out accident. They asked her 100 times whether there was some kind of accident. Tell us. If there was, tell us. And she never would, because the truth was unspeakable. All of her actions after the fact, immediately after the fact, the flashlight, the living room door, all that stuff, not yelling and saying, "Oh, something happened. Danny, help me. Quentin's not breathing." All that stuff, everything she did is totally incompatible with there having been some sort of accident here. In her final interview on November 21st, when she's been told that she knows she's being arrested for murder. For murder. This is like interview number 15. Now would be the time, if it was anything but that, anything but murder, anything but an intentional killing, anything but an intentional assault that resulted in his death, now would be the time to say it. And she doesn't. Because that's not what happened. This investigation ruled out accident. The evidence ruled out accident. This is something that they would have been happy to hear had it been true. There was no medical event. That's something that people, you're looking at a charge like this, it's natural to look at a way out of it. Is there some other way we can go to avoid this conclusion? Nobody wants to believe this. Well, they looked into that. They got all of his medical records for his whole short life. Right? All of Quentin's medical records. And we put in front of you 2 doctors who had like the most direct treatment of him and the most recent in time to when he was killed. This is like a combined 60 years of medical experience. And they said, no. If you're looking for an out there, you're barking up the wrong tree. It wasn't that. Dr. Quinta said Quentin was thriving. And Dr. Birch told you how minor and unconcerning these things were. It was not some random freak medical event that just so happened to occur in the context of all those circumstances with what was going on with her that night. There's no SIDS. You might find yourself wanting to go down the, well, don't kids just sometimes die route to avoid calling this what it is? There's no SIDS. It's way too old for that. Dr. Darasol told you that. SIDS has a lot to do with little tiny kids having a hard time, rolling and getting away from something that's obstructing their airflow and things like that. It's way too big for that. Way too big, way too strong. There's no accidental overdose. That was a possibility that was suggested by some lines of questioning regarding cocaine and so forth. One, it seems like they were, actually fairly careful with that, and it's expensive, and you're not going to lay it around and so forth. Then you heard from a forensic toxicologist, right, who looked at a bunch of stuff and didn't detect any of that on or in anything, including Quentin's brain tissue. All right, so they looked at all this stuff, and there are only so many ways to die. This was murder. There is nowhere else to go. This was murder. She killed him. Now, here's an instruction that's we really need to talk about in this case. Voluntary intoxication is not a defense. It is not a defense to a crime if you became intoxicated on purpose and then committed a crime. And that's a lot of what is going on here. She's essentially saying that is what happened. That is classic voluntary intoxication. Getting so fucked up that you do something. You don't get to drive drunk and wipe out a family of 4 and come out of your blackout, and she wasn't blacked out, she's lying about that, and say, oh, my bad, you guys didn't know I was drunk. And then the court system says, oh, you were drunk? Oh man, then forget about it. That's not how it works. That would be crazy if that were how it worked. A huge percentage of people that commit murder are under the influence of something. But you're responsible for your own actions. And, by the way, if you're intoxicated to the point that it's impacting your faculties, and what comes out is that you murder that child that you don't like, that was in there somewhere. Some people think the truth comes out when you're intoxicated. That was in there somewhere. This is not a defense. So let's just look at a couple of clips of the most she could say in her defense in this case.
What do you think people are going to say when here's that FaceTime?
Horrible mother. You're killing a child. God knows exactly what I'm saying.
Oh, I can see that.
There's no intention on it. It's not that I was planned out. It's not like I wanted to.
Lack of premeditation and it having been an impulsive thing is not a defense to murder. Most murders are impulsive, snap decisions. Every now and then you have a cold, calculated hit by like a contract killer or something like that. Most murders are just somebody snapping and killing somebody. And malice can be formed in an instant. There is nothing about what she's saying here that makes this anything other than murder. And this sounds like a confession to the state.
I wasn't alone. I much more than one thing, and I don't know if I did something to him. But if I did, I'll take my responsibility. I'll fight. I'll take my responsibility, but I'm faulty good God. And y'all come home with him alive and well in my arms. That's what I want.
She said a number of times that if it came out that she did it, if the evidence showed that she did it, that she would take her responsibility. And it's time for that now. We are there.
And if something does come up that I am at fault, I will take myself to that police station.
The evidence has proven that she's responsible. It has proven her guilt. And it is time for her to take responsibility for it. I put this picture up here because I think it kind of captures what happened in this case. Law enforcement searched through tons of garbage, through a great deal of garbage, to find the truth in this case. Both the searchers at the landfill, who broke their backs out there day in and day out, and in a more figurative sense, the interviewers who had to sift through all of the garbage that she was throwing at them the whole time. They did their job. The police come in for some criticism, and that's a complex conversation, good points to be made on both sides. But what everybody can agree on is that the police should be looking for missing children and trying to hold those responsible to account, trying to figure out who did it. And they did their job in this case. They sifted through the garbage and they found the truth. We have done our best as a prosecution team to present the truth to you in a clear and organized manner. And it's a difficult thing to do when you have an investigation that is this thorough and this broad-ranging, to come in and present everything that matters to a jury in a way that makes sense. And we've tried to do that. We've tried to show you the truth and to not waste your time. Now is your turn to find the truth, to look for the truth, to speak the truth. You may recognize these words, you may not. These are the last couple of words from the oath that you took when you were sworn as jurors. And you promised to a true verdict give according to the evidence. And a true verdict give according to the evidence, so help you God. That's what you had to promise to do. Now, Quentin is gone. He is not coming back. Depending on what you believe, Quentin is either with God or his short life on earth was all he ever had. I know what I prefer. He is gone. There's really nothing we can do for him. The only thing we can do, really, the only thing you can do in any murder case, the only thing we can do to honor his memory is to just simply tell the truth about what happened to him. Tell the truth about what happened to him. And don't perpetuate the defendant's lies that this was anything but murder. I expect that you're going to hear about the burden of proof in the defense closing argument and the concept of reasonable doubt. And, when all the evidence is against you, really the only play is to argue the burden of proof and talk about reasonable doubt and hope somebody gets wrapped around the axle. The judge will give you the instruction on reasonable doubt, and you'll see that the words common sense are right in there. Common sense are in there. It is right in there. That's the core of what it's all about, is just getting back there and applying your common sense. And we are confident that if you go back in the jury room and you apply your common sense in this case, that you'll return a verdict that speaks the truth about what you did to Quentin. Thank you.